Warning, this video contains spoilers for Final Fantasy 15. Yes, I know this video is about the Bouncer, not Final Fantasy 15, but just a warning. It's literally in the first, 30 seconds. Okay, got it? Beautiful. Lately, I've been thinking about game director Tetsuya Nomura and his love of musicals. For those who don't know, after he saw 2012's Les Miserables adaptation directed by Tom Hooper, tepid take, Tom Hooper doesn't understand musicals, but I digress. He considered turning Final Fantasy 15, then known as Final Fantasy Versus 13, into a musical. Now that could have meant anything from just a brief little musical number to a full-blown production. I just hope that the 2012 Les Mis movie wouldn't have been that influential.
Now bring me Noctis Lucius Kylum. It says here he's a pathetic king and super dumb. You know what that means. Yes, it means I live. No.
What I'm trying to get at is that Squaresoft had great ambitions to have grand cinematic storytelling in their products, dating all the way back to Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1, probably even further. Also, side note, the joy I felt during the Honeybee end sequence in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Nomura finally got his musical number, folks. We did it.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing.
Final Fantasy VII on the original PlayStation introduced some more visually cinematic storytelling with the introduction of CG cutscenes, and that trend kept up with Square's output throughout the rest of the PlayStation's lifecycle. So when a new system was announced, the PlayStation 2, Square was really out here like, let's make a movie. No, not that movie. Let's not talk about that. Yet. Square's first major release on the shiny, fancy, ooh, it plays DVDs system would be a concentrated, short experience meant to showcase the visual capabilities of the new console, while transitioning seamlessly from story to combat at the blink of an eye without the originally revolutionary aforementioned CG scenes. A straightforward, linear experience akin to a movie. Even with brand new, I can feel it in my toes and I don't know if I like it, 5.1 surround sound. Low-key missed that sound, not gonna lie. But it wasn't an RPG in the Final Fantasy series. No. We wouldn't be heading to Macarena Temple for another few months. This was a PS2 launch title, The Bouncer, a beat-em-up game. Yeah. Not exactly what you'd expect from a premier Square launch title, so how did it go? This is gonna take a minute. So, The Bouncer. Sorry, I mean...
The Bouncer!
It sure is a game. Look, when looking at a game that came out at the turn of the millennium, things aren't going to be perfect. Look, there's a launch game. And there's a launch game. Look, I'm just calling them like I see them. Happy to be proven wrong. The Bouncer falls more into the latter category. It absolutely is a visual showcase. Like, for the year 2000, this game looks great. Like, compare this to Final Fantasy IX, which came out just a few months prior. But as a cinematic, story-driven experience,
what is it?
oof. Like, oh no. Oh no. Let's run through this thing. Quick summary. Just gonna do my best. Help. So,
The Bouncer
is a game that takes place in a sci-fi steampunk land full of sci-fi steampunk people wearing fashion. Look at all that. Fashion. We zoom in on a bar called Fate, dramatic, where we meet our titular bouncers. No, really, they're actual bouncers for a bar. It's a very literal title. We got Sion, aka Proto Sora over here, Big Boy Volt, and Ko, the one who makes the funny ha-has makes this beautiful face. Also played by Steve Blum, but is credited as David Lucas. Okay. We also meet Dominique, our damsel in distress for this 2-hour story. Not a lie, this thing's only 2 hours. I don't have a joke for that. This thing is brief. While hanging out and celebrating Diet Sora's 1-year anniversary working at Fate, the bar is suddenly assaulted by various guards and the first level begins. So the way
The Bouncer
works is each segment of the game you get to choose what character you'll play as. Though I'd seriously advise on your first playthrough, optimistic thinking you'll be playing this thing more than once, sticking with one for the entirety of the game. There's some RPG-like mechanics with enemies defeated giving you experience you can then spend on increasing your stats and learning new moves, but this is not shared between characters. It's best to choose one protagonist and level them up as much as you can throughout the story. Trust me on this. It's a relatively quick learning curve.
The Bouncer
Is a 3D beat-em-up game with different buttons on your trusty DualShock 2 controller triggering different attacks as you beat people up in various 3D environments. First impression? This game is super pretty. I mean, it's the year 2000 pretty. Square touted this as a visually show-stopping showcase for the new PlayStation 2, and they really weren't joking. When comparing to, let's say, Final Fantasy IX again,
The Bouncer
just screams next gen. Big props to the devs at DreamFactory. This is something they actually deliver on. Now then, The actual gameplay? I want to just say it doesn't hold up today, but it's not even good by 2000 standards. I don't want to be mean, it's just not good. It's just this first level. Welcome to the game. Nothing will change. Sure, you can unlock new combos and such that provides some depth, but this is it. This is
the Bouncer.
Really a good litmus test for the average gamer. Like this first level? Good, enjoy. Find it very meh. Oopsie poopsie. For me, it's very much on the fine section of the scale of unplayable to the best gameplay of all time. The game works just fine, there's just not a lot to it. To its benefit, though, this game is only like 2 to 3 hours long, so it thankfully has a tough time of wearing out its welcome. And yet, it does. So the only thing that can save this game is the story. You know those Cliff Note versions of books that summarize them in the quickest way possible so you could cheat on your book report? Yeah, this game wishes it was that elaborate. You'd think with the extremely brief playtime, Square would have told a straightforward story that functioned as a movie of sorts. But no, we barely learn anything about these characters, and the game tries to fill you on their backstory on the loading screens. The loading screens. You get these paragraphs and paragraphs of random-ass conversations from before the game's story began, and okay, sure, I'll take my backstory wherever I can get it, but they don't give you the option of staying on the screen when the game's ready to load. I'm like halfway through the second paragraph and the game just goes, oops, too bad, no backstory for you. It's like watching an old documentary that just cuts to commercial when things start to get interesting. It is then that Axel arrived at the steps of the old mansion, ready to clean up the mess that had been made. We're just nobodies who have no one to be, yet we still are. But now you can be nothing instead of just being a nobody. What followed was a grisly display of violence not yet seen by the young Sora's eyes. I had heard of what had happened much later on, but tragically I was too busy sniffing up some darkness into the atrocities Sora witnessed. If only I could have stopped it. Axel bid farewell to Vexen. With a snap of his fingers, he...
Shouldn't you walk the walk? The brand new Spicy Baconator does.
Really, the story here boils down to a simple rescue mission. Dominique is kidnapped and the trio here's gotta rescue her, dealing with trains, mechs, breakdancers, and a random lady who turns into a panther because reasons. With the game this short, at the very least, it emphasizes replayability, as even though the trio of Sion, Volt, and Co are together for the majority of the game, there is a segment about 2/3 in where they separate. So depending on what character you select, you see different events play out from different perspectives, gaining just a wee little bit of insight into the character you're controlling as well. That's all good, but there's just so much story left out of the main narrative, and regulated to those horrible loading screens in this website called Google. There's just not much to get invested in. Take, for instance, spoiler alert by the way, skip to here to avoid... I'll give you time, I can wait. Alright, you good? Well into the story, we learn that Dominique is a freaking robot. Just out of nowhere, faceplate goes whoop. That's because the real Dominique is dead, and her brother over here, Mr. I'ma kill my father figure because I'm evil, couldn't bear to be without a sister. Listen, I'm not delving too deep into the plot, mainly because this game moves so freaking fast, nothing really sticks. You don't care about these characters and what happens to them, just a lot of events happen and the game ends. There's just no unforced underlying emotion pushing things forward. It's super disappointing in a game that's supposed to be a condensed next-gen cinematic experience. In fact, what if this was an actual movie? I mean, it's never going to happen, but I could absolutely see the plot being simplified and clarified for a feature-length adaptation. It could work. Okay guys, Square just announced a feature-length adaptation of The Bouncer. Oh my god, I'm such a fan. So here's my idea. I want to give some casting ideas, just ideas. Like, let's get some fresh faces in there. Okay. My first pick for Sion is Tom Holland. There just ends up being no saving grace for the Bouncer beyond its good for the time visuals. The gameplay gets repetitive way too quickly for such a short game, and the story is nothing to write home about. At least the voice acting is decent, though when the script isn't really all there, the actors unfortunately can only do so much to lift the material up. Developer DreamFactory's previous game, Ehrgeiz, God Bless the Ring, one of my favorite game titles to be perfectly honest, was relatively solid. So it's disappointing to see that their follow-up project not work as well as it could have. All I see here is potential. Potential for interesting characters, potential for an interesting story, potential for interesting gameplay, but it all just falls short. Speculation on my part, but maybe it was rushed out to meet the PS2 launch. It wouldn't be the first time that kind of situation had soured a game's quality. Like, I can see these characters becoming fan favorites. Like this crazy dude, Magetsu's pretty fun, screaming all the time.
I can't wait to butcher all of you! Get some help.
But when the lasting impact of
The Bouncer
is a reference to Dog Street, the area the Bar of Fate is located, on Pince's shirt in Kingdom Hearts, that kind of says a lot. DreamFactory would go on to develop more games for sure, but nothing under Square's name. A pity. I feel like I've been too negative and I kind of hate that, so what's redeeming here? What works about the game? It's 2020, it's good to be optimistic. Again, the graphics and animation are all around pretty great for the time. They even apply this glossy filter to the game that gets rid of any of those jaggies that can plague a bunch of the PS2's output. It looks good if a little bit like a thin layer of Vaseline's been applied. The animation works too, especially since there can be a fair amount of things happening on screen at once. Characters fight with distinct styles, and it makes the combat a bit easier in understanding how to dodge and respond to various attacks. It's a bit stiff, but relatively intuitive. There are some interesting narrative choices made here that feel decidedly next-gen too. The slightly diverting storylines when you play as different characters for one. Again, nothing too important is revealed when playing as a different protagonist, but it's an interesting concept nevertheless. Depending on what character you favor too can also determine whether some characters live or die. Of course, being the rush narrative of
The Bouncer.
I didn't care if this particular character survived, but still, cool that your decisions in this game have some consequences. Of course, in a very Telltale Games-like fashion, if the character lives, they have to die anyway later, but still. Damn it, I'm trying to be nice. And yes, while I didn't really enjoy my time playing the game overall, there is incentive to replay it. I mean, it's super short, so why not? Your level carries over to a new playthrough, allowing you to rank up your character of choice even further than you already did in the first go-around, along with experiencing the other characters' slightly divergent stories. Beyond just the story mode, there's also a survival mode where you have to just survive waves of enemies along with a multiplayer mode that lets you and a friend, battle against AI-controlled opponents. It's basic stuff, but it's nice it was included. Okay, more nice. The final boss was a pretty solid challenge. Look, I'm trying here. Chalk it up to mostly choosing the wrong things to upgrade as I played. Note to new players, don't just upgrade your stats, get those new fighting moves too. But boy, did the final boss take a lot longer than I thought it would. Got a bit frustrated, not gonna lie, especially because it's over 2 phases, so if your AI-controlled buddies are knocked out, you're done for. Pretty sure I just hit double digits with my attempts to beat this dude, but sheesh. Maybe it was luck. Maybe I spammed the right moves at the right time. Maybe it's Maybelline. That's a bad joke. But the final boss finally went down and my blood pressure thankfully decreased. Frustrating, yes, but challenge is good. Oh, another thing, I actually fully laughed out loud at certain parts of the game. Maybe some of that wasn't intentional on the game's part, but I swear some of it was. Trust me, there's definitely some unintentionally funny bits in here. Like this segment right here when Ko commandeers a vessel as they try to escape a facility and the original driver just bails.
Yo, driver, drop us off over there.
Perfection. In the end, however,
The Bouncer
is your typical launch game. Sure looks pretty, sure plays shallow. It does work as a graphical showcase for the PS2 for sure, especially when you consider that the game came out 20 years ago. It looks pretty spectacular. Doesn't hurt that DreamFactory was aided by the always wonderful Square visual works for its cutscenes, making for a relatively cohesive visual experience. If you ever find this game for cheap, I'd honestly recommend it for the visuals alone. It's a lovely time capsule into the launch of one of the best-selling consoles of all time, from a company that was still on such a high that had yet come crashing down after that movie. Again, another time. I honestly could go for another game in this universe too. The story is actually pretty decent once you've read the crap ton of supplementary content. And Sion, Volta, and Co. still have potential to be interesting characters. Reboot this thing, Square, why not? Maybe you have a lot on your plate right now, but has some franchise potential. Maybe. I don't know, this thing's super overlooked for good reason, but there have been worse games that have gotten sequels. Game's a mess, but an interesting one. It has a lot of ambition, but it just can't quite reach it, ending up a disappointment. It's a bummer, but I'm kind of glad I checked it out for myself anyway. Ooh, another interesting fact. The game's English dialogue was recorded before the Japanese voices, kind of the opposite of the norm when it comes to Japanese developed games. Not particularly consequential, but cool to see how internationally minded Square was with their game releases back then before the Enix merger was much of a thing. In the end, the Bouncer... Oh, it didn't
Bouncer.
work. Okay, there it is. It's not a particularly good game, but it's definitely worth checking out for the historical significance, if anything. There's a lot of new ideas introduced here that Square perfected and elaborated on further down the line to where we are today, with such blockbusters like 7 Remake just doing an incredible job with its cinematic storytelling. For that reason alone, I'd say check it out, or at the very least, watch a playthrough online. Well, another October, another offbeat Square game covered. The timing's coincidental, but now I just kind of want to play Dirge of Cerberus again. Remastered Dirge, Square, I demand my gacked in 4K Dolby Atmos. There are dozens of us. Thank you guys again so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you know when I upload. I got lots more to come, and I have some big projects down the line that I'm really excited to share with y'all in the future. Again, you can subscribe to me here on YouTube. It is absolutely free. You can also follow me on Twitter and on Twitch, where I stream 5 days a week playing all sorts of games, including, yes, the Bouncer. Thanks for watching, and have a great one.